love, and then there is greater love. There is charity, and then there is tzedakah. This passage in Isaiah is calling for us as his followers, as followers of Jesus, to a higher love, a love that changes and a love beyond merely giving. There really are three different things that this passage challenges us with. And the first is that we are called to compassion. You know, when I read the words of Isaiah 58, I get the sense that God is a little frustrated with the people. He's frustrated that he has to explain what should be obvious. He has to explain this no-brainer. He has to explain this thing that he's been saying to them for hundreds and hundreds of years. Something that they've had plenty of time to absorb and understand. They just have not understood it. Well, what is this? It's the 10 Commandments. I guess it really shouldn't come as a surprise to us that they struggled to understand that, because even 700 years after Isaiah's death, someone else had to explain the 10 Commandments, and that was Jesus. We as staff have been working our way through the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5 to 7. And in many ways, it is a teaching and an explanation of the 10 Commandments. Sometimes I wonder if God shouldn't have written an 11th commandment right after do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not bear false witness, do not covet. He maybe should have written, and don't make me have to explain myself again. I think that God might have been frustrated with the people. But the sad thing is that it had to be explained. So Isaiah in this passage names 8 things that true followers must do to keep the spirit of the commandments alive. You see, the Israelites attempted to live their lives for God, and in doing so, keeping the letter of the law. Their struggle was keeping the spirit of the law. You know what it means when he says, do not murder. He doesn't simply mean don't stick a knife in someone's chest and cause them to die. He means don't participate in all the evil leading up to such event, the anger, the jealousy, the revenge, the getting even, the rage, the hatred. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus was in many ways redefining the conditions of the law. How many times did he say, you have heard it said, but now I say to you? Remember how Jesus redefined the 6th commandment. He said, you've heard it said, do not murder, but I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother shall be subject to judgment. Isaiah had to explain the very simple principle, do not steal. Now we know what that means, but do we apply it throughout our lives? I wonder how many times do we wear a $200 coat to warm ourselves in the winter, knowing that it was made by a lady with 6 kids who's paid $2 a day in deplorable working environments in some third world country? And do we get upset enough about it to fight these kind of injustices? You know, does Isaiah really call that stealing? Well, he said, on the day of your fasting, you do as you please and exploit all your workers. Sounds like he's talking to the business owners. And it sounds like he's saying, you business owners are stealing from your employees. Workers are to be treated with dignity and paid well for their work. If you don't pay your workers a fair wage and create reasonable working environments, you in fact are stealing from them. Compassion is allowing God to write the law upon our hearts and not just our heads. So we are called to compassion. The second thing is that we are called to action. This passage in Isaiah calls us to be active. Isaiah challenged those worshipers in the temple to get off their knees and onto their feet. You know, he says God doesn't need your empty praise. God is not honored when they lie about in sackcloth and ashes. What honors Yahweh is for them to be actively helping those whose most basic human needs are not being met. I want you to know this morning that I am extremely proud to be a part of Grant. You know, we give to the community and we give to our world, and we help the poor throughout our community and the world with our weekly offerings and in many other different ways. We are a very charitable church, and with God's help, I pray that we will never grow tired of that kind of giving. But let me add that charity is never a substitute for justice. Charity gives, but justice changes. It changes the lives of the poor for the good and for good. Justice is what sends a young girl to school who can't afford it. Justice lends, expecting nothing in return. Justice doesn't just give charity, but it provides hope, like we are doing through our Run for AIDS. It enables people to do more than simply provide a meal, but it helps Beacon of Hope in Kenya to build relationships with people and help them to get out of their cycle of poverty. It helps to provide people with permanent solutions. We're doing this through City Church, where City Church is enabling people who are displaced and have come from other countries as immigrants and refugees. We are helping them to begin to build their lives here in Canada. We're doing this by helping a couple here who want to go and share their faith with an unreached people group, the Uyghur people in China. We're doing this through supporting a work that trains leaders in Bangladesh. And that list could go on and on. Where charity at times provides a much-needed Band-Aid, justice provides hope for the future. Charity gives, but justice changes. It demands the changes necessary for the lives of the poor to be elevated to a level playing field with everybody else. You know, one of the things that I love about this passage in Isaiah is really redefining the word fast and the kind of fast that the Lord requires. Is it to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover them and not to hide yourself from your own kin, as it says. This kind of righteousness, or tzedakah, defines a true understanding of biblical justice. So we are called to compassion, we are called to action, but we're also called to community. We're called to we rather than I. And when I say we, I'm spelling that W-I-I, and some of you know what I mean by that, not W-E, and let me explain that in a minute. We are called to community. I wonder sometimes if we don't need a major paradigm shift in how charitable ministries are thought through. You know, many ministries major on principles and minor on relationships. I was talking with the head of a rescue mission a few weeks ago, and he made this interesting comment to me. He said, our biggest problem with Christians is that all they want to do is take stands for the poor and come here and visit the poor and view the poor and to hand out food to the poor. But few are coming here truly wanting a relationship with the poor. I think an unlikely model for this kind of shift might be the console by Nintendo called the Wii. And yes, that is spelled W-I-I, but pronounced Wii. You know, up until recently, gaming was something done almost exclusively in isolation. Maybe one would play or two would play it the most. But the Wii seems to have changed that. You can now find Nintendo Wiis in nursing homes and in the center of a lot of family rooms. Why? Because Nintendo changed the joystick and made it work like the real world works. You know, my family and I have a Wii, and when we play the bowling game, which can be done with multiple people, we actually go through the same actions a bowler would go through. Same with tennis and golf and several other games. Suddenly, everyone can understand the video game because everybody understands how to bowl, how to swing a racket and other things, how to swing a golf club. The video game is no longer a bunch of buttons, but it works like real life works. Let me tell you that is real justice, because this father can finally beat his son at a video game. You know, the we has leveled the playing field between modern kids and out-of-date dads, and I'm very thankful for that. But here's my point. Charity requires that I give, where justice requires that I change the game so that I no longer have to give, so that the poor can play the game the same as me, so that they can live, move, and have their being in the same community as all of us. You'll remember the young man who was rich and religious and came to Jesus wanting to be saved. And Jesus told the man, follow the law. The man said, I have done this all of my life, he said. One thing you lack, Jesus said, sell what you have and give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. And then come and follow me. Jesus required that the man give, but he also required that he change his life's orientation. What must I do? That was his question. But Jesus said, let me tell you what God is doing. Come follow me, and we will do it together. Then you will know what salvation is, and then you will have true treasure in heaven. I know that sometimes it's hard to grasp how huge many of the global injustice issues are. But let's try something. Let's picture that the entire world is our village, and our village is made up of 100 people. Our village looks something like this. The village would have 60 Asians, 14 Africans, 12 Europeans, 8 Latin Americans, 5 from the US and Canada, and 1 from the South Pacific. 80 of those people would live in substandard housing. 67% would be unable to read. 50 would be malnourished. 33 would be without access to a safe water supply. 33 would be living on only 3% of the income of the village. 5 of those individuals would control 32% of the entire wealth. Only 1 would have a university or college education. 1 would have AIDS, and 1 would be dying of starvation. Those last 2 hit me the hardest because 1 has AIDS and 1 is dying because of stupid poverty. And in a world, when I say stupid poverty, what I mean is that in a world that provides 2.5 times the food that it can actually consume, there's no excuse for people going hungry. If the world were just 100 people, I know that you and I would do whatever we could for the one who was starving and the one dealing with AIDS. So maybe my question this morning is, what can you do and what can we do? And with God's help, that answer is endless. It's my prayer that in the weeks and months ahead, that God would help each of us to answer that question, and that Tzedakah would become a way of life for each of us. You know, justice can be found in simple decisions that we make throughout the day, from what kind of coffee you buy to what type of clothing you buy. My prayer is that God would not just create in us a sensitive heart, but we would be called to compassion and justice. May each of us truly wrestle with our own response to God's justice. Let's pray. Father, it's very easy to get overwhelmed as we look at the world, as we look at so many of the issues that so many of our brothers and sisters around the world are dealing with. And it's very difficult, Lord, even in a morning like this, to be able to talk about it and feel like we can walk away with some constructive things that we can do. But Lord, it's my prayer that you would, through your Spirit, be creating in all of us a sensitivity to the kind of justice that you want your followers to be bringing to the world. May we not just have that sensitivity, Lord, but as you call us to different things, may we be obedient in responding to that calling.